Welcome back. Anybody who wants to say anything, please feel free to push your space bar or whatever you do there to talk. I want to hear what everyone has to say. But let me just, talk about a number of things here. Actually, things that we probably heard about, but a little bit complicated sugyos, and I want to be ma'ayin into them. The purpose of this is not to come to Halachah l'maisa, but to understand under the hood, what's going on in Halachah here and how the Halachah works. So in the Torah, Hilchos Sefirat Haomer, Hilchos Pesach actually, Siman Tuf Pei Tes. So the Torah brings a machlekes rishonim, well-known machlekes rishonim in Sefirat Haomer. He brings a machlekes between the Bahag and Rav Hai Goin, two Goinim. The Bahag says, Im shachach levarech be'echad min hayamim, lo yivarech oid b'yamim shel HaRav. That the halachah is, and we're all aware of this, that if you forgot to count Sefira one night, Sefirat Haomer, it says, Sheva Shabbosais Tamimos Tiyana. That it has to be Tamimos. So, hence, complete, has to be a complete counting, right? From Pesach till Shavuos is a complete Sheva Shabbosais. There's 7 weeks there, Tamimos Tiyana. So says the Bahag, that if you lost a night, forgot to count Sefira one night, so, we appreciate you, but sorry to say, you're out. You're not in the game any longer, as we all know. So everybody realizes if they forgot to count Sefira, darn it, we missed it, we're out of the game. So what do? Says the Bahag, you keep counting anyways, but you can't make a bracha, that's for sure. The Torah brings Rav Hai Goin, which says, Rav Hai Kosav, Bein B'layla Harishon, Bein B'shar HaLeilos, Im Shachach V'lei Berach. If you forgot to count, even if you forgot to count the first night, Im Shachach V'lei Berach, Yivarech B'shar HaLeilos. You do count with a bracha on the rest of the nights. So, person forgot to count the Omer one night. You now, what do you do the next night? So now you have a machlekes, the Bahag and Rav Hai Goin. Bahag says you're out. Rav Hai Goin says you're still in. And the Torah, for one, does not come to a conclusion on this. But the Shulchan Aruch brings this machlekes without saying these names. In the Shulchan Aruch, in the Mishmeres, if you have one, in Tuf Pei Tes, Sifches, says the Shulchan Aruch, Im shachach levarach be'echad me hayomim. When he means im shachach levarach, it means you forgot to count, I presume. Im shachach levarach, says the Mishmeres, Ratzalaimer shaloi siper. He didn't count at all. You missed the night. Bein yom rishon, bein mishar yomim. Sofer, he's telling us that you do count bishar yomim, but b'loi bracha. So Mishmeres says, this is like a compromise between the Bahag and the Rav Hai Goin, because the Mishmeres says, Ratzalaimer shaloi siper v'loi niskar ad sfira she'achareha, v'hu adinim noidaloi she'esmol toa b'minyan, or the same case would be if you counted the wrong night last night. He said it was 12 and it was really 13. V'safar sfira acheres, dinai k'may shaloi siper klaus, so you didn't count correctly. So what do? Sefer b'shar yamim. You do continue counting, says the Shulchan Aruch, every day. Says the Mishmeres, kedas harbe poiskim, because this is the das of harbe poiskim. Dein sfiras hayamim ma'akvim zeh ezeh. That every night's something separate. So why do you count b'loi bracha then? Lachosh l'mandamar the sfir sheva shabbos is to be my spain and v'haleika. So let me just explain for a minute to make it perfectly clear. Let's go back to the Torah that brings this machlekes rishonim. And the way the Beis Yosef explains it, which is very kind of obvious, but that's what he says. He says that what you really got to look at here, why is there a machlekes the bahag, whether you're out or the Rav Hai says, no, you're still in. You have to look at the whole idea of Sefirat Haomer, and what does it mean tmimos? Does that mean that it's one big mitzvah? And since it's one big mitzvah, think of it as one long chain. And if you have one long chain and you're missing a piece in the middle, you have two chains. You don't have tmimos. Tmimos means you have one long chain. You took out a link in the middle, they both fall. And mamela, you don't have tmimos, you have two chains, not one chain. That's one opinion. Or there's the opinion of Rav Hai, which is also brought in Tosfos, that's the Shitas HaTosfos, that mapitom chain. What are you getting in all the chains here? Tmimos tiyana means you have to count every night. But you have to count every night, not to be Makayim one long chain. Every night is a mitzvah. So being that every night's a mitzvah, so okay, I forgot last night, but tonight I have a new mitzvah to count. So is it the pshat, as the Beis Yosef explains, the machlokes, the bahag, and Rav Hai, or we could say the machlokes, to put it more in our language, the bahag and Tosfos, as the Beis Yosef brings, that is the mitzvah of Sefirat Haomer one long mitzvah, or is it 49 mitzvahs? If it's one long mitzvah, let me be crystal clear here. If it's one long mitzvah and you're out, you don't have that one mitzvah. You didn't do the mitzvah correctly. It's like having three corners on your tzitzis or something like that. You just didn't do the mitzvah. If you'll say every night is a mitzvah, so then every night is a separate thing. And true, you have to do it for 49 nights, but there's 49 mitzvahs. So, to put it even simpler, when you count the Omer and you make it through the whole thing, are you counting, did you do 49 mitzvahs or did you do one mitzvah gedolah? So if you did 49 mitzvahs and you missed a night, so you did 48 mitzvahs. But according to the Bahag, no, the whole thing is just one mitzvah and you didn't do the mitzvah correctly. You're sitting the sukkah, you forgot to put on the schach. You didn't do the mitzvah correctly. So here we have a machlekes, the real machlekes, like the deep machlekes here is Sefirat Haomer one mitzvah or is it 49 mitzvahs? And this, the Shulchan Aruch says that we have to be choshesh for both shitas. Why? Because on the one hand, you don't make a bracha. Why? Maybe the Bahag is right and it's one long mitzvah. And now how am I making a bracha? So we say right away, he made a suffix and suffix brachas lahakel. As far as counting goes, suffix deraisa l'chumra. And since suffix deraisa l'chumra, you have to keep on counting. So it's not like you just count just to like keep the tradition. You're counting because Tosfos has to count. And really Tosfos has to count with the bracha. The only thing is that since the Bahag says it's one long mitzvah and you can't count, so now you have a suffix brachas. Should I make a bracha? Should I not make a bracha? Wow. If I ask the Bahag, he tells me one thing. If I ask Rav Hai, he tells me a different thing. So suffix brachas lahakel, you don't make a bracha.
If it's 49 mitzvahs, what is the Tamimos add?
That you have to do it at night. The way they understand Tamimos is not that it's Tamimos, one long thing. Every day has to be Tamim, which is why we count at Marv as the day begins. You could ask a kasha, why don't we count at Shkia? Okay, that became the Minhag Yisrael to count at Marv, like the day begins with Marv. Goes back to the olden days, like in America, where we'd have Mincha Marv. So now you proclaimed a night, so the Tamimos really only means that you're counting the full day. I'll just tell you something big that you said that, like in the Luach, let's say, that you use in Shul, and it's brought from the Mishnah Berurah, that the first night of Sfir, meaning the second night of Pesach, you shouldn't waste any time. Don't daven late, don't daven Rabbeinu Tam, don't do any of those things. Why? Because you have to have Tamimos. You want to make sure you're counting right as soon as possible. But that's only going according to the Shita that it's one long mitzvah. So his Tamimos, the Tamimos is the Chumrah of Tamimos, it is one long mitzvah. So you want to make sure you start as early as possible, and Erev Shavuos, you end as late as possible. So you have Tamimos. But if you hold that every mitzvah is a laila b'fnei atzma and a mitzvah b'fnei atzma, so the Tamimos is within the 24-hour period. That's the Tamimos. So there's no real big deal about about the tmimos in that sense. The main thing is you laila v'yoim. Laila v'yoim. Okay, am I clear so far? That's the halacha.
Yes.
Alterator, just want to make sure we understand it clearly. So halacha lamaisa, I'll just tell you while I'm here, just another very, very important halacha. I'm going to mention it in the morning after davening. And that is that kol safek b'Sefirat Haomer, I'm saying this halacha, I made it up. Kol safek b'Sefirat Haomer, you continue counting with a bracha. For instance, let's say if you didn't count, so you got a machlekes rishonim. Let's say you're not sure if you counted. Did I count Omer last night? So, or that's one suffix. Another suffix that comes up is, was it not Lila? Like, or maybe I counted Ben Hashmashas because the minyan I daven and daven's too early. I made early Shabbos or something. And it was a suffix Lila, a suffix Yom. So it's a suffix. Did I count or I didn't count? Or what I want to talk about today for a few minutes, or let's say a katan sheniskadol, a kid becomes bar mitzvah in the middle. Do we count the original counting or do we not count the counting before he was bar mitzvah? Do we count it or do we not count it? Suffix. So those are the three sveikas that I know of in Sefirat Haomer. I'm a suffix whether I counted, a suffix whether, like for instance, did I say the right day? Another suffix could be whether it was Lila or was it still yesterday? And another suffix could be a halachic suffix whether I was chayiv in counting, like I was just became bar mitzvah on Lag Bomer. So all those three questions, the halacha is you continue counting with the bracha, every one of those halachas. Halacha l'maisa, why? Because a sveika. You have a sveika. The sveika of brachas is l'chumra. What does it mean? That if I have a suffix, whether I count it or not, so we don't say suffix brachas l'hakel, we say the other way around. It's a sveik is not considered a suffix. Sveik means Rav says that I did count, and now I have a chiyuv deraisa of counting the Omer. So it's chayiv a new bracha. So whenever there's just a klal, you can klal nokut biyadcha, that whenever I have a suffix in Sefirat Haomer, except for this big suffix of whether the halacha is like the Bahag or the halacha is like the Rabbi Goin. But if I have a personal suffix in Sefirat Haomer, so the halacha is I continue counting with the bracha. Because what's the two sveikas, Yoni? Why is it a sveika?
Is it whether you need to say the bracha at all, or like?
Says the bracha. But why is it a sveika? I'm not sure whether I counted last night.
And then maybe also, is it the suffix on whether it's one long mitzvah or 49 separate mitzvahs? Is that the other suffix?
Right. So one suffix is that I count. Even if you say I didn't count, maybe the halachah is like Tosfos that says that it's every night's a separate mitzvah. So I didn't count. Nobody's going to tell me that if I didn't put on tefillin one day, chas v'shalom, that I don't put on tefillin tomorrow. Today's one thing, tomorrow's another thing. So you have a suffix. Normally we say suffix brachas l'hakel. Sveika. I have two sveikas. First of all, did I count or didn't I count? And the second, or did I count correctly or didn't I count correctly? That's one suffix. And even if you'll say I didn't count, I have maybe the halachas like Tosfos. So there's two sveikas going into my question tonight as to whether I should count with the bracha. And this is a big klal in halacha. The sveika of a brachas is not lahakel, it's l'chumra.
So can I ask Rabbi Haber that two things. We're not choshesh for a bracha levatala, like, and why? And secondly, what's the difference? Like, even if we didn't say the bracha, if we just count, isn't that also considered to be a form of counting? Like, why is the bracha in this case like such a ma'akev?
It's not. We're not talking about a bracha. You don't know whether you counted or you didn't count. Bracha, you make a bracha because it's a mitzvah. So the question is, can I make a bracha tonight? I'm not sure if I counted last night. I just simply don't remember. I was drunk. Right.
So so bracha levatala we're putting on the side. It's not as like something else is more. I don't know what the word, more significant than the issue of.
Let's back up a minute. Suffix brachas lahakel. What does that mean? that if I have a suffix, whether I should make a bracha or I should make a bracha, I make a why. Because if you want to be machmir and make the bracha, you might be making a bracha levatala. And it's a suffix deraisa of leisisa shem hasham l'shav. So when we say suffix brachas lahakil, what we really are doing is we're being machmir on the avera of the Ten Commandments of leisisa. So it's funny that Chazal say suffix brachas lahakil, don't make a bracha. They should really say suffix leisisa l'chumra. However, if it's a sveika, so it's no longer, because sveika is not a real suffix. Two sveikas is not considered a real suffix. So what's this, two sveikas or three sveikas or four sveikas? We say, probably I did it. And since I say probably I did it, so now I don't have to worry about the suffix derisive of leisisa because it's a sveika. Am I clear to everybody? Because I don't want to go further if I'm not clear.
Can I ask a basic question?
Yeah.
Rabbi Haber, a basic question. If you hold it's one mitzvah, the whole counting, why do we make a bracha every night?
That's the Suras HaMitzvah. In other words, every time you're saying good. Let me just make it louder here. You're saying a good vart. Why don't I just make a bracha the first night?
Yeah.
Maybe a bracha the last night. And it's one long mitzvah, like tefillin. You don't make a bracha every minute. So the answer is that since I have a new chiyuv eschal on me every night, to be mishtatev, I'm putting a new link in the chain every night. So every time I put a link in the chain, that's a mitzvah, and I have to make a bracha. That's the source of mitzvah. But I happen to agree with you that the very fact that we make a bracha every night, to my ears, sounds like tosfos. That every night's a separate mitzvah. In fact, he says that the Sefirat Haomer in Shin Vav brings this machlokes also, the Bahag and the Rambam, he calls it the Rambam, and he says that it's not mistaver at all that it should be one long mitzvah, miha, that we make a bracha every night. You see, it's a separate mitzvah every night. Okay, so that's like you could ask a shaila, like if I have to show up for work every single day and I have a 1-year contract, so is every day another kiyum and a mitzvah, or is this like one long thing? One big thing. Okay, that's a good point. Okay. One more time, halacha l'maisa is we're machmer like both shitas. So where it's not a sveika, but it's a suffix. Where it's a suffix, we go l'chumra, that you keep on counting, and l'chumra on the losisa because of machlokes rishonim whether you make a bracha or not. So suffix brachas lahakil is for the bracha, and you have a chiyuv, not just you have a chiyuv to keep on counting because maybe the halacha is like tosfos. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. So we're machmer on both ways. Yoni, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'm just lucky because I didn't understand the question. Okay.
I mean, it's like it brings out the Sugyos. So I've still got the sorry, but
yeah, that's the sugya. What I just presented to you is the sugya. Now, let's be ma'ayin a little bit, according to everything we learned, into probably the most popular bar mitzvah shtetl during Sefirat Haomer, and that is, what about the case of a katan shenisgadol be'emsa hasfira? So the Sefer Chinuch in Shin Vav, mitzvah Shin Vav, and the Minchas Chinuch Sham says we got to think about this, because katan becomes a bar mitzvah, kid becomes a bar mitzvah on Lag Bomer, just to take a day. So now I'm mechuyev. I'm mechuyev to put on tefillin. I'm mechuyev to wear tzitzis. I'm mechuyev to say Kriya Shema. I'm mechuyev to count Sefirat Haomer. Does he count with the bracha or doesn't count with the bracha? So says the Minchas Chinuch that, listen, if every night is a separate mitzvah, So, okay, now I have a new mitzvah. Count with a bracha. Of course, I count with a bracha. If it's just one long mitzvah, sorry, kid, you missed the first half. You're a Johnny come lately, and you can't do this mitzvah anymore. This is not for you this year.
Onus, no?
So he's an onus, okay? So he's an onus, but the fact is that he's not doing the tmimos of the bahag, and since he's not doing the tmimos of the bahag, you should keep on counting. You can count, you should count, because maybe the halacha is like Tosfos, but to count with the bracha, that would have to be, says the Minchas Chinuch, it would have to be that you're chayav from the beginning, and from the second night of Pesach, you already counted. Otherwise, according to the bahag, you're not doing anything.
Is there no concept of a tamimus for him?
What do you mean?
Meaning that the Indian is not counting 49 times, but counting every night that you're mechuyev to count. So since he's become bar mitzvah halfway through, as long as he does tamimus in his counting, then that is tamimus for him.
Right. So you're asking, Mr. Links is asking that what's the Minchas Chinuch talking about? Even if you'll say like the bahag, correct me if not, this is not what you're asking. Even if you'll say like the bahag, it's one long mitzvah, we're talking about a good kid. And obviously he counted the whole time. Just like he put on tefillin. He counted the whole time. So enochanami, he wasn't a bar chiyuva into Lag Baimer, but Fort he counted. So since he counted, you're asking, which is a great question, in my opinion. That's exactly the question I want to ask. Why isn't that called counting?
Yeah, Tamimus is 17 days. For him, Tamimus is 17 days. Lag Baimer or whatever it is.
That's not what Robert's saying.
Yeah,
I think it is.
I'm asking slightly differently from the Rav. The Rav is, I think, is saying that he counted the whole 49 days. Just part of it was without a chiyuv, part of it was with a chiyuv. I'm saying that his tamimus is just a period that he's mechuyev to count, meaning that if he becomes.
Oh, you're saying what Avram Nadel is saying.
Yeah.
Nah. Like. What does it mean? Tamimus means Sheva Shabbosos Tamimos Yana. That's the pasuk.
Right.
So just because he didn't count the bracha doesn't mean he still needs Tamimus. He needs 49 days.
There's no other definition of Tamimos.
For 49 days.
Other than, well, how do I know? Because it's a pasuk. Sheva Shabbosos Tamimos Yana. These 7 weeks should be Tamimos. You say, okay, look, for me, let me just say something. Let's say. A goy becomes a Jew during the Sefirat Haomer. So, what would you say about that? Magayer, common. He's Magayer on Pesach Sheni. By the way, that's a time to do gerus. People do bake gerus on Pesach Sheni. It's a minute of goyim. So you do gerus on Pesach Sheni. So I'll tell you something. L'kul alma. I shouldn't say l'kul alma. Clearly, it would seem to me that according to the bahag, doesn't count. According to the Tosfos, that every night's a separate mitzvah. Okay, so now I just came out of the mikvah. I have a mitzvah, so I should count, right? So I think there we clearly paskin. If I'm not mistaken, it's in the Shach and Yerodea in Hilchos Gerim. We I didn't look today, but I think that's where it is. We clearly paskin by a ger that he doesn't count with the bracha because of our Shulchan Aruch. He brings our Shulchan Aruch and he says, look, there's a machlokes about this, the bahag and the Rav Hai Goin, so don't count with the bracha. By a kid, it's still a shaila. And I'll tell you why. But let me just say one sentence. Like, a kid becomes a grown-up. Let's just think about it for a second. Many of us have made bar mitzvahs, or were bar mitzvah for sure. So a kid becomes a grown-up. So when a goy becomes a Jew, is it the same thing or not? What's the difference between a goy becoming a Jew? Let's just think about it for a second. a guy becoming a Jew or a kid becoming bar mitzvah? Is there a difference?
There's a big difference. First thing I would say, I apologize. I joined late, so I apologize.
I didn't even know you were here. Shalom Aleichem.
Yeah. Until he's bar mitzvah, there's a chiyuv on the father, l'chanech et beno. When he becomes the bar mitzvah, the father says Baruch Shepah. But the mitzvah that the katan is doing at that moment, in fact, he's doing it b'koach aviv. And therefore, he counts with a bracha even before he's a bar mitzvah, because he's doing it because of chinuch. The day he becomes the bar mitzvah, now it's his mitzvah, not the father's chiyuv. So he continues with the bracha.
If a guy is practicing, by the way, make practices with a bracha or without a bracha?
I don't know. There's no chiyuv of chinuch in terms of father. Maybe the bezdin has
the guy counts with the bracha until they become Jewish. This is an ironic halacha. Like a guy decides they want to become Jewish. I don't mean guy in any type of pejorative. I'm just saying a non-Jew decides he wants to become Jewish. So we tell him, okay, let's get in practice over here. Count with a bracha, and then the minute he becomes a Jew, stop counting with the bracha. It's like one of those erotic halachas. Why? Because now you're chayiv in bracha levatala, and you have a suffix bracha, so you don't make a bracha. Before you had no isser of suffix bracha a suffix brachas lahakal. There was no such thing. But I'll tell you,
a guy who becomes Jewish is like born that day, so to speak.
Oh, he's a born again.
Yeah, it's a completely new entity.
So we find a lashon of katan shenis gadol. We don't find a lashon of katan shenoilad.
No.
So there's a difference. But Philip, that goofy you have to understand. That needs an explanation here. But it's true. Like, and that's exactly what I want to explain here in the next few minutes. Like, why is it that by a guy we say he's a katan shenoilad? Why? Because he went from an enoi bar chiyuva to a chiyuva. And here we say, no, you went from an Eino bar chiyuva to a chiyuva, but that doesn't make you noilat. Before you were not mechuyev in mitzvahs, now you are mechuyev in mitzvahs. Let's just say simply, you were a Jew. You were a Jew.
Question is, does a katan's ma'aseh have a cheshivas of a ma'aseh mitzvah at all?
That's the question. That is the question. So let me tell you halachah. Let's try to work this out. Yeah? Okay, if everybody's with me, let's try to work it out for a minute. What's the din? We gotta put on our thinking caps here. A katan lives in your house, move into a new house, and you as a father say to the katan, you know what? We're in a new house. You put up the mezuzah, mishum chinuch. Put up the mezuzah on your room, mishum chinuch. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to do. You're mechanech a child, and mitzvah's mezuzah. When he becomes bar mitzvah, now he's in his room. He's got a mezuzah, but there's a din that you have to be kovei a mezuzah, and he wasn't kovei a mezuzah. What am I saying? Make my question clear before you jump at me. Let's say a guy put up a mezuzah when he was practicing. When he's Megayer, we have to tell him, Reb Yid, take down all of your mezuzahs and put them on again with the bracha. Just like we have to tell him, we know you've been keeping kosher for the last 6 months, really kosher, but we're sorry to say, take all your kalim now and go to the mikveh because you used them as a guy. Even if we told him to toivel them before, he's got to re-toivel them. Not only that, yesterday, you know what you did in your frying pan? You made bishul akum. So, poor guy has to go now, and what he did with begiyusai is garnish. have to do everything again. We don't find a cotton, even if you'll say that there's bilas to a cotton, that he has to go and toivel his kalim, or but he doesn't even have to. It's mefurish in Shulchan Aruch, Reish Tzadik Aleph Hilchos Mezuzah. It's mefurish in Shulchan Aruch, in Hilchos Mezuzah, that a guy does not have to be koveya them. I'm sorry, a Jew, a cotton, does not have to be re-koveya his mezuzah. Yeah?
Make a point?
Yeah.
I remember when my son was bar mitzvah and he made his own tzitzit. The halachah, if I understood correctly, if you're omed al gabav, I was watching him, he did it, and then there was a question if I could use those tzitzit also, because he was 12. He made his tzitzit, I was watching him. Rav said he can use them, but then I remember there was a shallow whether I can use them also.
Very, very interesting, because this cotton puts up a mezuzah. He doesn't have to be re-koveya. But okay, so let's do something else. Kid cotton. Go around to everybody, put up mezuzahs for them. Become a Lubavitcher and put up mezuzahs for everybody. It's all bad. It doesn't work. It only works for him. So same thing with tzitzis. But you see something here. It does work for him, and this is the point I want to make. Why does it work for him? Why does it work for him?
I'm sorry, but also Yisachar asked the question in the chat whether there'd be a difference if it was on the main door or on a bedroom door. I was thinking the same thing. Like if the father has a chiyuv to put up the mezuzahs, so the same thing. Like maybe the front door he couldn't, but a bedroom door is maybe okay. But even that, like
Nachlasfi in Yeridea, Reish Tzadik Aleph is in the bottom of the Shulchan Aruch, says that as long as it's in his house, you don't have to be rikoveya. Long as it's in his house. Kilo, the whole house has a chiyuv to be mechanech the kid, they're mechanech the kid, and they do it. But a non-Jew, for sure, you would have to redo. That's for sure. They say I'll tell you like a thing. Just take a commercial break here, but I was once explaining the all the misonim in Chumash, like why the Jews always complaining about everything. We don't have water, we don't have because they'll always give us back the tuna fish and the sardines from Mitzrayim. So I just once explained, my own thought was that for many reasons it's the actual personality, the tuna of a Jew to complain. This is one of the things that brings us further in life and helps us grow. It's possible that it's just simply a Jewish nature. So I tell a story about a gerus that I was involved in way back, and it was a very kind of some gerus are rough and you don't know if it's lishma. This was very smooth. It was very lishma. There was no marriage involved. There was no anything I told this guy to do, he did, and it was just a perfect gerus, so to speak, a very smooth ride, never a complaint. And then it came time, went to the mikveh. So went into the mikveh. The first words coming out was, "Whoa, was that cold?" So I said, okay, the gerus was typhus. This was obviously a good gerus. Excuse me one second. I don't know how to shut that up. There's a difference in the mahus, apparently, between Jew and Gentile, and between Katan and Gadol, there's no such difference in mahus. It's the same thing. Just you don't have the right level of das to be able to be chayiv in the mitzvahs.
Isn't that the peshat though? In it's a suffix when a person becomes a Gadol.
Yeah,
we fix it at 13. That's all, because majority.
Yeah, but that's not what's going on here. That's not what's going on here. In other words, we take on, you can't daven for the Yom the day before, but you can be koveya, mezuzah, even l'chatchila, by the way. as a nachos, even lechatchila, he could be a kaveya mezuzah for now. So here's the question: why? Here, let me frame the question here. Why is it that by Sefirat Haomer, the Pinchas Chinuch is telling us, look, if you say Sfira is all one day, then there's no way that this kid can count with the bracha. So says the Pinchas Chinuch, Psak Halacha, we don't paskin that way because it's a suffix, but sveik sveika. But that's what the Pinchas Chinuch says, that according to the tzad, that like of the bahag, that it's all one day, so you can't count with the bracha. But the same bahag will be maskim that he could be kaveya mezuzah in advance of his katnus. So why is it that he could be kaveya mezuzah, even though there's a din that you have to be kaveya mezuzah, it has to be done correctly, or make tzitzis, whatever you want. So even though there's a din he has to be kaveya mezuzah, that works. But if Sefirat Haomer's own day, you started in the middle, no Sefirat Haomer for you. So the question on the table is, what's the difference, to put it in very simple terms, what's the difference between Kriyas HaMezuzah and Sefirat Haomer?
The chefs of the mitzvah, in one case, might be the Maisa primarily, and the Das is secondary, or the chefs of the mitzvah by Sfira would be primarily the Das, because there's no Maisa, physical Maisa.
What do you mean? Hayoim yoim echad b'omer. Why isn't that a Maisa?
Well, it's an Amira. It's an Amira. That's the question. Is an Amira a Maisa, or Amira is it primarily the Kavana, not the Amira, because Amira is a Shvacha Maisa? I think good, all good Sugyos, but I think you're going the wrong avenue here to think about this. I agree with you. There's a difference between the Chefs Shul. Well, you have to look at what the Chefs Shul mitzvah is, but let's fear ice over here. So Rashiva taught us the following, I tell you, which is the nature of the shir, or is it Yisai? There's a halacha. The Rambam brings us in Hilchos Korban Pesach. Okay, bringing a Korban Pesach, a cotton, part of the family, dad brought a Korban Pesach for the whole family, Sedla Beis Avos Daraisa. Father brought a korban, and now I became bar mitzvah a few days later. So do I have to bring a korban on Pesach Sheni or not? What a good question, right? Am I chayiv in Pesach Sheni because I didn't bring a korban? I was a cotton, and I couldn't really be included in the korban because I was a cotton. Or, what do you mean? Dad brought a korban for the whole family. I was part of the family. I was there. I watched it. I smelled it. I ate it. So, what are you giving me Pesach Sheni?
That seems to be an easier question.
Why?
Because at the on Tes Vav B'Nisan, he was still a cotton, and he wasn't chayiv in the midst of Korban Pesach as a gadol. Our question.
Therefore, what he should.
He doesn't have to do Pesach Sheni. He wasn't chayav on Pesach Sheni. Is for people who missed it. He didn't miss it on Pesach. He wasn't chayav. We have a more difficult question with Sefirat Haomer because of the complex nature of the goof of the mitzvah. The question is now the day after his bar mitzvah, whenever that was, on the 12th day of the Omer, on the 21st day of the Omer, he's now a gadol, and there is a mitzvah which is out there, which still needs to be mekuyam. But
he didn't miss it if he wasn't chayiv, according to your principle.
Right.
And so you're saying a little bit, or Pinchas, you're saying a little bit what Avram Nadel said before, that maybe that's his tamimos, at the end there. But I'm saying there's no such concept, I don't think. So it's a very similar. So the Rambam says, let me just use this clear. The Rambam says, cotton, this is language, Hilchos Korban Pesach, Perek Hey. Cotton shehigdil, bein shnei hapsachim. Yeah? Chayav lasois Pesach Sheni. However, says the Rambam, that's in a vacuum. V'im is yasam. V'im shachtu Allah b'rishain. But if the father had in mind by the shchitas korban pesach and pesach rishain, potter. So we have here a clear Rambam that he's potter, but not for the reason you said, Pinchas, that he's not potter because he didn't miss anything, which is nice. I like that story, by the way. But that's not what he says. Not because he didn't miss anything. Like you're learning Pesach Sheni is only for people that were mechuyev and they messed up, like tshuva. And he's done tshuva. He's saying something different. He was already included in Pesach Rishon because his father shechted for him. So if he was like someplace and nobody shechted for him, okay, we're sorry, you're just like a tamei nefesh or whatever. So you have to bring a korban Pesach Sheni. But if you're im shachtu alav b'rishain, if on Pesach Rishon the father shechted for him, pater. That's what the Rambam says. Now, before you say how this fits into the Sefirat Haomer, it does, right? It does fit into Sefirat Haomer. So the Kesef Mishnah on this Rambam, listen to this for a second. It's going to open the whole Sugya cracker wide open here. The Kesef Mishnah says that there's a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah Chavches, Halt Cup. And the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah Chavches, Im Ochal Matzah, I'm quoting from the Kesef Mishnah. Im ochal matzah, new case. This is case number 4 we're up to. Ochal matzah, not talking about a cotton, but oidai shoite. At this situation, forget about cotton. Person goes in and out psychologically. And he goes from, I don't know if this could be real or it's a theoretical case. I don't know, but it doesn't make a difference. So theoretically, a shoita, cheresh, shoita, v'katan are pater from mitzvahs. Seems to be all one sort of a thing. So if a cheresh, shoita, v'katan, so let's say, it's hard to say the katan became a gadol in the middle of the Seder. Hard to say that. But it's easier for him to say the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, shoita shenis pakeach. A shoita all of a sudden comes some zinin on Pesach night. So says the Gemara, says the Gemara, chayev lechol oid pam. He has to eat matzah, another kazayis matzah. Tamasha asa, says the Kesef Mishnah, b'shah shahaya shoita einoi klum. Says the Kesef Mishnah, v'hachanabi, gabi katan. Masha shachtu alav. So what if his father shechted the korban for Pesach for him? Einoi klum. Yitzarech lahakriv, and he should be mechuyev to bring a Pesach Sheni. Keep everything in mind. This is like you got to create a tapestry here. So so the Rambam is telling us that, okay, look, his father shechted for him on the korban rishon, he's pater. Says the Kesef Mishnah, no. What's the Rambam talking about? Like we know that a shoita shenis pakeach, he has to eat again matzah before Gemara. So how could it be that the Pesach Rishon worked for him when he was a cotton, if the matzah didn't work for him if he was a shoita? So what's the obvious answer to the Kesef Mishnah's question? Well, there's a difference between a shoita and a cotton. Is there a difference? Char shoita and a cotton, it always goes together. What do you say, Ephraim? Are you there?
Yeah, well, the cotton was underage and he wasn't eligible, so to speak. The shota, in theory at least, was eligible, but he wasn't competent.
So the shaita has to eat another kazayis matzah. Why?
Because he missed it.
And it wasn't a bar chiyuva. He's a cotton. A cotton's not a bar chiyuva, right?
There seems to be
there's a word for this. There's called somebody who's mechuyev or somebody's not mechuyev. A shaita is pater from a mitzvahs.
One case we're talking matzah, one case we're talking korban. By korban, you have a kapara. Matzah. It doesn't say in Rosh Hashanah that he has to have a Pesach Sheni, just that he has to eat another matzah.
He's asking that if I have to eat another matzah, then why don't I have to bring a Pesach Sheni?
Right.
There seems to be some aspect here of the father's relationship with the son, and bringing a korban for him, and having and the father making sure that the son is counting the Omer before his bar mitzvah. Something of that seems to transfer to the katan, which is not the case by a shota who suddenly becomes bar das.
By the korban, there's a kapara. Even if the korban disappears and nobody eats it, there's still a kapara, and there's no chiyuv of Pesach Sheni. But erev tachel matzos is an independent chiyuv. So even if there's no Beis Hamikdash, so the shota shnis pakeach would have the same issue. It'd have to eat a matzah again.
So the shota would have to eat a matzah again, but he got a kapar from the korban pesach, you're saying?
The same way the katan and the shota both got a kapara, and therefore neither of them is chayiv in Pesach Sheni.
Would you say theoretically, if a katan, you knew for sure, like I'm just saying theoretically, if a katan becomes a gadol during the seder, he has to eat kazayis again?
It would seem so.
So if he has to eat a kazayis again, so you're making a chiluk yitzhak between a korban and a kazayis matzah. I'm just not understanding what the chiluk is exactly.
First of all, kazayis matzah is independent of whether there's a Beis Hamikdash or a korban.
But so what? Well, it's got nothing to do with us.
So, and by the korban, the issue is there a kapara? If there's a kapara, there's no chiyuv Pesach Sheni.
Okay, so you're saying that has nothing to do with the Bezman Beis Hamikdash Hayakayim. What you're saying is that a korban, the accomplishment is that you got a kapara, so you got a kapara. By Pesach, by matzah, the chiyuv it's a mitzvah achila, and they didn't do an achila.
Right.
That's what you're saying, right? Nothing to do with the Zman Hazeh, not independent. Just you're saying. Let me on this Rambam in this Kesef Mishnah. So, and this is all I learned from the Reshiva. There's a Reb Chaim Brisker, Reb Chaim Alevi, and this has to help us. All this I'm saying just to say this Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim says, I'm reading his language. The mitzvah's korban Pesach. Hu bechefza shel ha'maisa mitzvah. Dahainu ha'akrova shel korban Pesach. I'm just going to read the words. V'kimin the Metzias nikrav ba'adoy korban Pesach, the cotton, eino mufka mitaris karbanos. Mamela chashuv kekayim ha-mitzvah, ve'eino tzarech lahavi pam shenis. Ma'ashen kein, says Reb Chaim, I'm going to go back over, don't get nervous. Ma'ashen kein, gabi achilas ha-matzah, ha-mitzvah ba me'achiv lechol matzah. V'zeh masha ha-chefza shel mitzvah. Did anybody understand this, Reb Chaim? Me either.
I don't claim to understand it, but
what does he say? How would you say this, Reb Chaim?
Now, it's the mitzvah of a korban Pesach is Selebayis. So the cotton has fulfilled his mitzvah as part of the bayis. Whereas matzah, he hasn't fulfilled any mitzvah at all yet until he becomes a gadol.
Let me tell you the key words of Reb Chaim here. The key word is mufka. That's our word for the day. The family brought a korban. Yeah, family korban. So the family brought a korban. He was not excluded. He's not like the Russia and the Haggadah. He was not excluded. Part of the family. Eino mufka mitaris karbanos. I think it might mean something else.
He's allowed to eat it.
Can eat it. But matzah, henochiv and matzah. you don't have to give your kid matzah, except for chinuch. But you don't have to give your kid matzah. If you're short on matzah, you don't give the kid matzah. So he b'chal wasn't included in any kind of a mitzvah there with matzah, nothing. So since he wasn't included in matzah, he was included in the korban, he wasn't included in matzah. Why? Because matzah is, you have to eat it. There's nothing to include, nothing, there's no esoteric accomplishment going on with the matzah. You have to eat matzah, you didn't eat matzah. But a korban, like Yitzchak said something like this, you have to have a kapara. So I'm part of the family, I got a kapara, my family did this.
What about al matzah samarim yochlu? Is he mechuyev in that also? Or just the matzah by itself?
I'm not sure why you keep on bringing this up, that there's an independent chiyuv of matzah. That's not the point. The point is that a korban, he's not mufka from the korban, and the matzah, he is mufka from the matzah. He had nothing to do with achilus matzah b'chiyuv.
Rav Haber, perhaps you can say on Seder night, by those customs that just the Baal Habayis said Magid, if in that theoretical construct he becomes a gadol during the course of the Seder, when his father said Magid, or his grandfather, he was included in that mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, and if he becomes a gadol, maybe he has to eat matzah, but he doesn't have to hear Magid again.
Why?
Because it was said for all of those who were present.
So Magid is like a korban, you're saying?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, v'gada to levincha b'yom hahu leimor. Is that talking about katanim or gedolim?
I was going to say, it's your children. It doesn't say there's no age, no age difference.
Everybody, right? Same thing as with Sela Beisava, same thing with the korban. So Yisachar is making a good dimion. Okay, so I just said a lot of different things, and but what comes out, I'm going to have to continue this because I want to do justice to it. But what comes out here, according to this Reb Chaim, is that you have to look at a mitzvah to know whether the cotton was part of it or not part of it. You have to look at the mitzvah and saying, was he mufka from the mitzvah or was he not mufka from the mitzvah? Meaning, a korban is an example of a case where he was included, or like Yisachar says, like Magid. Easier for us to understand, maybe. Matzah is a case where you can't eat matzah for somebody else. So he was not included. So hence the Rambam will say clearly that the kid has to eat matzah again, or the shoita has to eat matzah again. And he'll say also clearly that he doesn't have to bring a korban Pesach Sheni, and there's no contradiction there, right? So far, so good. What about mezuzah? Let's work backwards.
It's not mufka.
Mezuzah is not mufka. Why not?
It's on the house.
So listen, David, what's the difference between mezuzah, being koveya mezuzah, and achilas matzah?
This matzah is on the individual.
I don't have a chiyuv to put on a mezuzah. I mean, everybody has. No?
You have a chiyuv to put on the mezuzah. The house has to have the mezuzah.
Yeah, but what if a guy put on the mezuzah? It's no good. So you see the kviyas of the mezuzah is very important, right?
Right. But when, right.
But there's no chiyuv on each individual to put on that specific mezuzah.
There should be a mezuzah which was put on by a Jew. That's what you're saying.
Right.
Now, shein kein matzah, everybody has to eat a matzah. It's not like matzah has to be eaten in my house here. Like we do matzah. Somebody doesn't eat matzah, they don't eat matzah. But the chiyuv is achilas matzah. So you're saying that mezuzah is more like a korban than it is like a matzah. Everybody agreeing with that?
Yeah.
And therefore, yeah, Ephraim, you're nodding out loud. Yeah.
I agree that it's more like it. It's not precisely the same, but yes, it's
more
closer.
Yeah. Because what? Because I'm in a house. Because you see, not everybody has to put up a mezuzah. You see, you have to be in a house that there was a mezuzah. Even though, if a guy would put up the mezuzah, I'm not yotzei. I got to take it down and put it up.
Because you need the level of das. If a guy writes a Sefer Torah as well, it's also not good. There's like, two parts. It could be a beautiful, great ksav with all the halachas, but you need that issue of the das with it.
Yeah. I had this awkward situation. I was fundraising and a guy in Westchester, a non-firm guy. So he says, "Oh, if you're coming, Rabbi, we want to put up a mezuzah in our office. Like they want to put up a mezuzah and make a ceremony." So I'm not sure. It wasn't religious, but that's what he wanted to do. So I said, "Sure, pleasure to put up the mezuzah." But when I came, he told me that the maintenance guy already put up the mezuzah. They didn't want to bother me with hammers and nails and and ruining their $1 million decor. But you make the bracha, on the mezuzah. It's just such a Westchester story. So it was like a big law firm. So I'm like stuck over there because like the maintenance guy standing there with a big smile and the owner standing there. By the way, the name of the owner was Trump. It had nothing to do with this Trump. It was a Jewish Trump, but a law firm. Anyways, it was like an awkward situation. So I did completely the wrong thing. I said to Mr. Trump, I said, much better if you make the bracha. No, that was just the chicken's way out, because what I should have done is taken it down and made the bracha and put it back up. That would have been the halachah. Guy put it up. I'm just saying, it's a her. I wasn't going to make a bracha because the bracha of Atala. I'm not doing a kriyas mezuzah, and what am I making a bracha on? Like a guy put up a mezuzah, it's garnished. But so I said to the owner, I said, it's your place, chayvus hadar. You make the bracha. But then I said a little chumrah. I said, look, let's do a little thing. Like take the screwdriver and pull it out a little bit and make the bracha and push it back in. So that was my psak, which is probably a wrong psak, but that's what I said. But it just demonstrates how common such a thing could be. So let me just end with a question. How does Sefirat Haomer fall into this? Is Sefirat Haomer like a matzah? Or is Sefirat Haomer like a carbon? Or is Sefirat Haomer like a mezuzah? For this cotton that didn't count the Omer properly, or with a properly, they probably didn't do it with a chiyuv, is it like he ate a matzah when he wasn't a chiyuv, which was garnished? Or was it like a carbon was brought for him, which is good? Or was it like a mezuzah, whereas in a mezuzah, as Ephraim pointed out, it's like, but it's not exactly. Or a mezuzah, you see, I could be kaveh the mezuzah for myself and really not for anybody else. And I don't have to be rikaveh the mezuzah. So there's three parts. And what we need to discover, Mir Hashem, join me next week, is even a bigger sugya, because this is all just examples of the sugya of chinuch. I'm not talking about giving parenting lessons. I'm talking about the chiyuv of chinuch. What's the halachic mitzvah d'Rabbanan of chinuch? And how does that, which I don't have with the goy, by the way, and how does that get attached to the mitzvah d'oraisa that I have afterwards? A million cases. I'm sitting in a sukkah, I become bar mitzvah, I have to stand up, make another leisha b'sukkah. Like, what's the, and all right, that's where I want to continue. So we'll leave it at this. Okay. I wish you all good weekend. Yom Ha'atzmaut, Yom HaZikaron.
Rav Haber?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to speak with you sometime today. What time is a convenient time for me to call you?
WhatsApp me and I'll tell you.
Say that again?
WhatsApp me and I'll tell you. Okay.
Okay.
I can't tell you such a thing in public.
Okay.
Well, we're being recorded still. So thank you for a favor.
Okay. Bye.
Rabbi Haber. Earlier, I mentioned the Inyan of chinuch as well, and you didn't respond to it, but now you just mentioned it again.
Because I pushed you aside. Because I want to really treat the sugya of chinuch and what is its mahus and halacha. Again, I'm not talking about like the obligation in parenting and training and developing good habits. So chiyuv d'Rabbanan chinuch and how that ties in. That's exactly what I want to talk about. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Okay, come back again, same time, same place next week.
Right. All right. Baruch haba.